Google's take on it. This is Google's levels of AGI. So here's kind of like the level of AGI, and here's where we have narrow AGI. So for example, we have narrow AI that is superhuman. It means that it outperforms 100% of humans on these narrow tasks, right? Of course, if you think about something like AlphaFold, AlphaGo, so this narrow AI that just plays chess is superhuman level AI, narrow AI. It will beat any human at chess. So that's narrow tasks. And the general sort of side of that is, anything, basically most tasks. So like a level 0 AI was narrow was calculator. Level 1 is emerging. And this is where they put, ChatGPT, GPT-4, Bard, Llama 2, Gemini, right? It's sort of level 1 emerging AGI. So it's equal to or somewhat better than an unskilled human. And then level 2 is competent. This is where it's at least 50th percentile of skilled adults. And here they give examples of competent narrow AI, but competent AGI has not yet been achieved, where it beats, 90% of skilled adults. It's in the 90th percentile. And for narrow AI, here they put things like Imagen, DALL-E 3, so generative image models, right? Then level 4, Virtuoso, better than 99% of skilled adults. And they have Deep Blue and AlphaGo. AlphaGo will beat 99% of skilled adults. It beat Lee Sedol, the world champion Go player, 5-0, I believe. But I guess it's still not as insanely good as, the chess playing AI, right? And of course, Superhuman just completely better than 100% of humans. Currently, how the world is, we believe we're kind of here. We're in this emerging AGI. And when most people talk about AGI, like when will AGI get here, I feel like they're probably talking something like competent AGI or expert AGI. So either it beats the bottom half of adults, of skilled adults, or perhaps 90% of skilled adults. At some point, Sam Altman said something about, future AI models being better than the median human, I think he said. Basically, competent AGI. Let's take our definition of AGI to be somewhere between level 2 and level 3. So it's either better than half of the people or better than 90% of the people or somewhere in between, whatever. Now ask yourself this, could OpenAI have something behind closed doors that is at least as good as half of skilled adults? So it writes, it does taxes, it checks your spelling, it can produce images and videos and product packaging and write marketing copy. It can use Excel and Word, it can browse the web. Like all the tasks that your office workers can do, like it's as good as half of them. Is it conceivable that OpenAI has this? Well, if they trained GPT-4 in July 2022 and had a bunch of discoveries since, and by the way, GPT-4 is still one of the best models. I mean, now it has competition, has legitimate competition, and I think Gemini 1.5 will actually beat it in in certain areas at least. So GPT-4 isn't the undisputed champion anymore, but it's not by any stretch obsolete or out of date or anything like that. So if that's the model that we're using that's at the top of the leaderboards and it's trained in July 2022, then it's important to understand that what we're seeing is like light from very distant galaxies. Whatever we're seeing happened a long time ago. So going back to this, if we were looking at something like this, and the question was, how likely do you think that OpenAI has a level 2 competent AGI as what they call basement AGI? In other words, it exists, but it's behind closed doors. It's not accessible by the world, right? It's in somebody's basement. And let's assume it doesn't have to be economically viable, meaning that, for example, ChatGPT, it costs cheap enough to run to where, they can have a model for free, they can have a paid model. Perplexity has a free version and has a paid version. So the point is they got the cost down to where it could be released to the public, the whole world can use it, etc. Forget that for a second. From certain papers that we read on this channel, it seems like spending more compute on inference, sort of letting the computer think really hard about the answer, that improves its ability to answer that question. It almost replicates the abilities of a more advanced AI. So for example, if we asked GPT-4 a question, and let's say normally it costs 10 cents in compute costs to answer that question. What if we allowed it to spend $10 million of compute to answer that question? What would happen? Well, it seems like from some of the research that we've seen, it seems like that would be a simulation of how, for example, GPT-5 would answer that question. Just by increasing the compute, we're able to see how that model would behave at a much more advanced level. In fact, I believe Ilya Sutskever talked about that a little bit, because he said it would basically, this sort of approach would allow him to do some safety testing on next generation models to make sure that everything's cool before we actually train that model. Before we unleash it, we can kind of simulate how it would behave by just spending much more resources on it, answering any given question. Sort of, it's a way to approximate it, to kind of glimpse into the future almost. So my question is, knowing that we know about where OpenAI is, what we see versus what they most likely have behind closed doors, and also, not taking how much stuff costs into account. So let's assume they just have, unlimited access to compute. Is it possible that they have a competent AGI, something that's as good as 50% of skilled adults? What odds would you give that? To me, that seems very likely, very possible at least. Maybe better than 50-50. So in terms of answering the question, when will we have AGI? Whoops, did you miss it? Because if OpenAI had GPT-4 in July 2022, it has been compounding since, because keep in mind, the GPUs have improved drastically since then. The funding has improved, the technology, the research, everything has improved. And, assuming they've been compounding this whole time, dropping more and more grains of rice on the board, and we're well into that second half of the chessboard, well, maybe the thing is already here. The AGI is here. It's just not distributed yet. It's just not released yet. And that's why